In case anyone watching tonight needs any more reassurance about the state of this conflict, take a look at this op-ed from a professor in Doha, published by, of all places, Al Jazeera. That is a Qatari media outlet. Doesn't typically cheer for the U.S. Here is the headline, quote, "The U.S.-Israel strategy against Iran is working. Every aspect of Iran's ability to project regional power is being successfully degraded." And take a look at this article from the usually far-left Atlantic, quote, "Glimpsing victory in Iran. The campaign has already delivered major wins for American national security." But something much bigger is starting to come to view. Now, a handful of very loud, well, let's say, isolationist Democrats, people that have agendas, one's pretending in some cases to be part of President Trump's base. They're not happy. This includes the now former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, who announced his resignation on X, writing, quote, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed, pay attention, no imminent threat to our nation." Pay close attention to that. It is clear that we started this war due to the pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. First of all, President Trump is not swayed by any person, country, or lobby. Now, these puppet tropes and conspiracy theories pushed by Trump haters is frankly getting quite old. And as Senator Lindsey Graham pointed out, this is nothing more than a Democratic talking point. Anyone who actually knows the president, I've known him over 30 years, does understand that President Trump, he makes up his own decisions. He'll listen to everybody, and he makes up his own mind based on his own instincts, period, end of sentence. He's not going to be swayed by lobbyists, politicians, countries, world leaders, the media, or anyone else on planet Earth. And second, not a clear threat from Iran? Really? Really, Joe? Ken? Because in 2020, this is what you tweeted. "I personally think we should have crushed Iran's ballistic and nuclear capabilities." And in 2024, you posted the following, quote, "Iran is conducting coordinated attacks across the region, synchronizing their conventional military with their proxies in multiple countries." Imagine what they have been able to plan with a wide-open U.S. border for the past 3 years. Also in 2024, Kent openly worried about the threat to President Trump's life that was posed by Iran. Is that an imminent threat? In other words, Iran definitely posed that imminent threat that he says doesn't exist. And by the way, we haven't even mentioned the nuclear threat. Now, let's go back. This is the definitive interview as far as I'm concerned. It happened right here on this show. Mideast Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, watch and listen to what he said.
They opened up with telling us that they had the inalienable right to enrich, to which we responded that from President Trump, that we had the inalienable right to stop them from enriching. So, but they opened up by challenging us. Their next statement to us was that they had 460 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. 60% enriched uranium would take a week, maybe 10 days at the outside, to bring up to 90% weapons grade. So it was a clear threat. They were boasting about having it. There is no reason whatsoever to be enriching past 20% unless you're going for a weapon.
A week away from 11 nuclear bombs potentially being built because they would have weapons-grade uranium. That seems awfully imminent to me. And by the way, Iran was not willing to give up this weapons-grade, highly enriched uranium no matter what. Watch. You offered this low-level enriched uranium for civilian purposes. Now, I want to be very clear. What you told me, you offered it to them for free, whatever civilian uranium they would have, in perpetuity, if they would not enrich, and that obviously would include, you know, genuine American inspectors anywhere, any place, any time, I assume was included.
That's correct. Well, oversight protocols were very basic here because they violated all the protocols. In terms of their enrichment, it was very, very clear. They had plenty of 20% material. That, by the way, was another telling sign of their insidious motives. And as I said, they had the 60%. We had a red line on enrichment. However, we were willing to help them convert to a civil 1, 2, 3 non-enrichment program. And what you're referring to is, as a little extra, we suggested to them that we would provide fuel to them for free for a long period of time. And their response to that, you would think they would feel that that was something gracious. But their response to us was that this was an assault on their dignity.
Now, that, by definition, is an imminent threat. Most reasonable Americans do not want to risk their lives or the lives of their children and their grandchildren with a nuclear-armed Iran. That is a regime that chants death to America. They are the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. It is that simple. Deal with this threat now while it's easy, less difficult, or face a nuclear-armed death cult regime later. So despite what you may hear from Democrats, conspiracy theorists, isolationists, those that hate President Trump, those that undermine Donald Trump, those that are diabolical against President Trump, MAGA, including almost all of you watching tonight, support the president's decision to protect American lives. Don't believe me? Let's go to fake news CNN. If they're reporting it right, it's got to be true.
The MAGA base really likes the U.S. military action in Iran. Take a look here. Okay, MAGA GOP on the U.S. military action in Iran. Look at this. Nearly 9 in 10, 89% approve of the U.S. military action in Iran. That is the MAGA GOP base. Just 9% disapprove of it. This is tremendously popular among the Republican base. And, of course, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, overseeing the effort. It seems to me that a lot of people are taking that into account, including President Donald Trump, who has been smiling an awful lot at Marco Rubio lately.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.